two scientists create a virtual reality device to help people face their fears. However, a female test subject uses it to fulfill her dark fantasies, blurring the lines between reality and VR. As her actions spiral out of control, the scientists must race against time to stop the unhinged woman's sinister plans. One evening, Erin steps into a foggy virtual version of 1880s London. As she wanders through the eerie streets, she enters a dimly lit room. In the room, a woman lies on the bed, covered in her own blood, her face crushed and mangled beyond recognition. As she stares at the lifeless person's body, a figure emerges from the shadows and steps closer toward her. Without a word, the figure hands her a bloody knife, and a smile spreads across her face. Outside the virtual reality system known as Quadrant, Meg watches closely as Erin experiences the simulation. She takes note of the test subject's every reaction and writes down her observations. As Erin moves through the disturbing scenario, Meg's face tightens with worry. She sees how deeply the test subject is immersed in the experience, and a sense of unease settles over her. Meanwhile, her fellow scientist Harry observes the simulation through his laptop monitor. The man says that Erin is coming back to reality, signaling his colleague to get ready and to prepare to take the quadrant off of the test subject. So, the female scientist quickly approaches Erin and checks the quadrant, while Harry monitors the simulation levels. Aware of the urgency, the woman prepares to remove the device, keeping track of the time to ensure a smooth transition without errors. As the man announces that Erin is on level 1, he begins shutting down the quadrant. Simultaneously, Meg starts to remove the device from the test subject's head, carefully pulling it off. After taking the device off, the female scientist greets the woman and tells her that she's back in the office with her and Harry again. Then, Meg asks if Erin recognizes her, and the male scientist asks how her first experience in the quadrant went. Instead of answering the pair's questions, the test subject just looks at them. Later that day, the scientists sit down to interview Erin. The woman asks the test subject to describe the fear she felt while in the simulation, wanting to understand the emotions it brought out of her. Erin responds that she didn't feel any fear, and the answer perplexes Meg. The female scientist glances at Harry and asks the test subject the same question again, adding if she experienced any panic or dread during the simulation. However, Erin smiles and reveals that she doesn't feel fear, but excitement during the simulation. Then, the woman admits that being in the quadrant actually turned her on. So, Harry points out that he's never heard anyone describe their quadrant experience the way the test subject just did. As Erin recounts the details of her VR experience, the curious, but skeptical Meg takes note of everything that she's saying. The test subject calmly insists she's telling the truth, further confusing the female scientist. Then, Meg mentions that according to Erin, the disturbing images of blood and dismembered bodies have haunted her since childhood, after she encountered them in a book. The woman wonders why, even though the test subject's memory of the horrific images has never left her, she doesn't get scared even when she was in the same room as Jack the Ripper. Erin smiles and explains that she only saw the woman's lifeless body and never witnessed Jack the Ripper committing the crime. She compares the situation to witnessing a car accident, when a person, somehow, can't look away. As their talk continues, Meg makes the test subject reveal what she's seeking in her participation in the quadrant study. So, the woman says she wants to have an insight of what was in Jack the Ripper's mind while killing his victims. The male scientist contradicts her thought and firmly explains that the quadrant isn't designed to explore others' minds, but to interpret and simulate the test subject's existing fears. He adds that it makes their nightmares feel real, so they can confront and overcome them. Erin nods and confidently replies that she already understands this, and says she didn't just join out of curiosity, but for the $50 reward as well. Meg emphasizes that the ultimate goal of the device is to help her eliminate her fears completely. However, the woman insists she isn't afraid at all, and she wants to do another session as soon as possible to learn more. As a warning, Harry mentions potential side effects of using Quadrant, and asks if the test subject's eyes feel sensitive to light, but she dismisses the concern, saying her eyes feel fine. Then, Meg questions Erin about her actions inside the simulation, asking if she interacted with anything. Erin denies doing so, but admits she was tempted to touch the lifeless woman's body, but managed to hold herself back. Harry commends the test subject for resisting the urge to touch the body, noting that the show of restraint is a step toward moving away from her obsession with Jack the Ripper. The male scientist also mentions Erin's dream of writing the ultimate true crime story, suggesting that the Quadrant could become her most powerful research tool. Moments later, he instructs his colleague to schedule the test subject for another session. the man retrieves a medicine bottle, hands it to Erin, assures her that it's his personal, all-natural formula, and advises her to take 2 tablets daily. The woman accepts the medication and casually asks for her payment. While Meg hands her the money, the door suddenly swings open and Robert enters. Apologetic, the man explains that he thought the session was over, and that he just stopped by to get a request for his medication refill. The male scientist assures him he isn't interrupting anything, and introduces Robert to Erin. Then, Harry asks the man to share his experience with the quadrant to the newbie, since he's been part of the program for over a year. Though initially hesitant, Robert agrees to the scientist's request, and Meg tells Erin that she'll learn a lot from their longtime test subject. Later, the 2 test subjects walk out the door, and the woman asks her companion what he suggests they do with the $50 she just earned. So, the man says she gets to decide because it's her money. As they continue walking, Erin asks questions about how he met Meg and Harry, and how he got involved in the study. While listening to him recount how his involvement with the quadrant study began, Erin places the money in the guitar case of a female musician performing outside a building. She tells Robert that she gave the money to the lady so she can get a bite to eat. Erin's kind deed makes the woman smile, and the pair continue on their way. Meanwhile, Meg and Harry share a glass of wine, and after seeing the concerned look on her face, he asks what's on her mind. The woman reveals that she thinks it's time to reconsider Erin's participation in the study. The man disagrees, arguing that the test subject is an ideal candidate because she has no emotional baggage. The female scientist counters by pointing out Erin's obsession with the killings, and reminds him that their device is meant for mental healing, not entertainment. Frustrated, Harry defends the test subject, insisting that the device needs someone to showcase its potential. He sarcastically adds that they can't rely on Robert or the eccentric newsstand guy who claims he's being attacked by elves to share their breakthrough with the world. Meg says that there are plenty of people they can help, and have already helped. But he says that if they want their work published and recognized, they'll need someone like Erin to share her story. He believes the test subject can overcome her obsession with Jack the Ripper after a few more sessions, and become the perfect spokesperson for their device. Harry also reminds his colleague that she knows the emotional journey involved in the quadrant process, urging her to stop worrying about problems that don't exist. Unconvinced, Meg responds sharply, stating that these problems could come along sooner or later. Later, Erin and Robert arrive at the woman's house, located next to a cemetery. Inside, she offers the guest some tea, which he accepts. As he looks around, he notices that the walls are covered with pictures of Jack the Ripper and eerie photos of his victims, heightening his discomfort. The woman hands him the tea and asks if the quadrant has been worth it for him after a year of participation. So, Robert shares that he isn't sure if it's helped him that much, and takes out his medication. While taking a tablet, he reveals that unlike Erin, who's paid to participate, he pays Harry to treat him. He confides that the quadrant hasn't cured him because his nightmares have worsened, which means he can't stop the sessions. Moments later, the man glances at the woman, and her face begins to distort into a demonic form. Erin tries to calm him, but it doesn't work, because in his reality, Robert sees a demon growling at him. Scared, he starts screaming, but a hand grabs him and pulls him away. Meg removes the device from Robert's head while Erin holds his hand. With blood smeared all over his mouth, the women try to talk to him, but all he feels is relief upon seeing his fellow test subject still with him. Harry asks Erin what happened, so she explains that after he took his medication last night, he fell asleep. However, he woke up screaming, and she remembered that he mentioned he had a session this morning, which is why she brought him to the laboratory even though he could barely stand on his own. When the male test subject demands an interview, Harry refuses, reasoning that it's not the right time. Furious, Robert yells that Quadrant isn't helping him, and it's only making his nightmares worse. He accuses the scientists of failing to cure him, and instead, further pushing him to the edge. Harry tells the test subject that he's overreacting, and Meg asks why he suddenly feels this way. To their surprise, Robert says he doesn't want Erin to experience what he's going through. The male scientist dismisses him, stating that the woman's session is none of his concern. However, Robert insists that she was the one who helped him return to reality after his last experience with the Quadrant. The two men continue arguing, so Erin steps up and tells the concerned man that she wants to do it. She adds that it's only her second session, and that she wants to see how far she can go in her own world. As they prepare for Erin's second session, Robert holds her hand as Meg places the device on her head. The female test subject, once again, finds herself on the streets of 1880s London. As she looks around, someone approaches her and gives her a knife. Since she's happy to receive the blade, her real body in the Quadrant room reacts with a smile. In the VR world, the the test subject sees a woman across the street. When she approaches the lady, she's suddenly wearing a coat just like the Jack the Ripper. Then, both women enter the house, and Aaron's real body reacts again, displaying excitement. Worried about the test subject, Robert, Meg, and Harry exchange concerned looks. In the simulation, Aaron kisses the woman, and their interaction intensifies. She begins to undress the lady, and they continue making out, with her real body responding to the excitement. As the woman lies down, Aaron starts stabbing her with a blade. Meg, observing from the real world, becomes concerned as the subject goes too far beyond the intended limits of the quadrant. She urgently calls for Harry to bring the woman back, but the man explains that it's too late because she's too deep into the simulation. Moments later, Aaron finally returns to reality, and she calmly assures everyone that she knows where she is and who they are. The female scientist tells the woman that she needs to calm down first before they start the interview. She also warns that Aaron can get lost in the quadrant if she goes too far. The test subject just smiles and says that she's fine and they don't need to worry about her. Then, she claims that she has something to do and that she needs to leave immediately. Worried, Harry says that the quadrant can mess with her mind, and she might hurt herself if she leaves right away. He invites her to eat first, so she admits that she's hungry and needs the $50. After the male scientist hands over the cash, she smiles and says she'll be right back. Then, the woman turns to Robert and tells him that she'll see him later tonight, because she needs to do something important. Once Aaron leaves, Meg tells the male test subject to stay away from the woman, even though she knows that he won't take her warning seriously. On the sidewalk, Aaron talks to the starving female musician. She helps her up to her feet, and they make their way to her house. Later, the host prepares wine, so the freshly bathed guest tells her that she doesn't have to go through the trouble of entertaining her since she already gave her $50. They sit on the couch and start kissing, and the woman asks Aaron if this is what she wants, and she nods. As they kiss again, the host removes the towel from the lady's body before undressing herself. Eventually, Aaron gets on top of the guest and straddles her. In the middle of the smooch, the deranged woman suddenly stabs the unsuspecting musician. She continues attacking until blood covers her body and face, and her victim perishes. After the despicable act, Aaron flashes a satisfied smile as she stares at the woman's lifeless body. Back at the Quadrant lab, the inebriated Meg notices the blinking lights on the device suggesting that Aaron's still connected to it. The woman tells Harry that they need to find the test subject immediately, but he indifferently says that he didn't see anything unusual. The response from Harry annoys Meg, and she starts arguing with him again. As she is trying to go out, Harry tries to stop her, but she slaps him hard. Harry, startled by her slap, steps closer and hugs Meg, gently calming her. As he soothes her, his hand discreetly reaches for the syringe. He injects the medicine, and she immediately falls asleep. Later that night, Robert arrives at Aaron's house. They talk, and their conversation grows intimate, eventually leading them to make love. When it's over, Robert drifts into a deep sleep, experiencing his first night without nightmares in a long time. Upon waking, Aaron insists Harry and Meg haven't truly helped him, and that he's been avoiding his fears instead of facing them. He sees the truth in her words, and decides to take the Quadrant device without drinking his medicine first. Aaron gives him some motivation, that she will be there helping him fight the demons in his own world. The male device maker is happy, thinking that Robert is finally cured because he is brave now and wants to fight back his fears. The patient corrects him, saying it's not about them or their device, and that this might be his last session. Hearing this, Harry dislikes it, but still proceeds to take Robert into the Quadrant simulation. In his world, Robert faces the monsters once more, their voices shouting at him. His determination to fight strengthens, especially when his co-tester enters his world. She hands him a knife, and together they shout back at the monsters, slashing at them with fierce resolve. The simulation ends with Robert standing victorious, having overcome his fears. After his session, it's time for Aaron's turn. Meg tells Robert to leave the room, knowing that things could escalate if he stays. Robert, however, insists that he needs to be there for Aaron. The woman looks at him calmly and tells him she'll be fine, asking him to trust her. Reluctantly, he steps back, watching as she prepares for the session. In the simulation, Aaron finds herself again in the streets of London in 1880, dressed as the real Jack the Ripper, unlike in the first two sessions. Meanwhile, in the real world, Robert is driving his car, but he's not himself. He's also with his girlfriend in her world. They talk beside the road in London, and she tells him the help she needs is for him to speak to a woman across the street. Realizing it's simple, Robert follows her instructions without hesitation. He approaches the woman and tries to get her attention, while his girlfriend slowly moves toward the woman from behind. As Robert talks to the woman, the female version of Jack the Ripper stabs her from the back. The scene frightens him, but he stays silent. In the quadrant room, Erin feels happy as the session affects her. Meg warns her not to go too far and removes the helmet. Meg knows what's happening. She realizes their female patient is using the quadrant for something dark. The scientist warns the girl, saying there's something dangerous in the quadrant that Erin doesn't understand and urges her to be cautious. Erin dislikes how Meg speaks to her. She tells Harry to find a new partner, or she won't join the study again, then walks away. Meanwhile, Robert finds himself in front of a cemetery near Erin's house. He sees his girlfriend talking to a young woman at the cemetery gate, the same girl they killed in the simulation world. He watches them walk into Erin's house. Moments later, he hears a terrifying scream, like a woman in pain. Robert goes to Harry and tells him what he saw. The two make a plan to stop Erin. After Robert leaves the session room, Meg appears. She admits she overheard their conversation and suggests calling the police. Harry disagrees, saying he will cure Erin like he did before. Later that day, Robert visits Erin at her house. They kiss, and Erin notices he's no longer shy. To ensure his loyalty, Erin pressures Robert into a blood oath. She slices her palm, makes him lick her blood, then cuts his palm and licks his. With this, the oath is sealed. Meg is left alone in the room. While inspecting something, she hears a noise outside. She follows the sound to the elevator and finds Erin dressed as Jack the Ripper. When the elevator opens, Erin slashes at Meg with a knife, injuring her hand. Meg runs back to the room, locks the door, and tries to call Harry. At the same time, Robert is asleep on Erin's couch. His woman wakes him up and tells him about Harry's call. After the call, Robert rushes to meet Harry and Meg. Robert is confused about how Erin could hurt Meg when she was with him the whole time. The scientists explain that she has overpowered the quadrant, giving her teleportation-like abilities. Harry tells Robert to lure Erin into the simulation world. He gives Robert a knife and keeps a gun for himself, determined to protect Meg and take revenge. The plan begins. Robert enters the simulation world with Erin, while Harry goes to her house to kill her. Meg stays with Robert to observe. In the simulation, Erin kills Robert by stabbing him multiple times, enraged by his betrayal. Tragically, his death occurs in the real world as well. At Erin's house, Harry arrives, thinking she isn't there. He sits on the couch and gets a call from Meg, who tells him about Robert's death. Grief overwhelms him as he tries to process the news. Unnoticed, Erin approaches him from behind and slits his throat. Meg, the only one left, decides to confront the mad patient in the simulation world. She attracts her into her own world, a place far more terrifying than the worlds Erin or Robert created. The two women fight, and Meg reveals she's far worse than Erin, which is why she warned her earlier. Despite Erin's attempts to fight back, Meg overpowers her, pinning her down and stabbing her repeatedly. As Erin's lifeless body lies before her, Meg feels a surge of happiness. She exits the simulation and returns to the real world. Now alone, Meg smiles. She feels stronger than ever, ready to take full control of everything.
Subscribe to watch more videos like this, turn on notifications and leave a like to help the channel out. Thank you for watching.